As Ginny indicated, I'm Alan Rutberg. I'm the director of the Tufts Center for Animals and Public Policy here at the Cummings School of Veterinary Medicine. This is welcome to all of you for our very first Animal Matters seminar of the 22-23 academic year. We are pleased to have as our first speaker this year, Pete Coppolillo. Pete is the Executive Director of Working Dogs for Conservation, which is nice because it ties in two of the major interests of the center, dogs and conservation. Pete received his bachelor's degree in biology and environmental conservation at the University of Colorado and his Ph.D. in ecology at the University of California, Davis. He worked for the Wildlife Conservation Society for about 10 years in New York and in some of their field studies. He's helped plan and carry out conservation strategies on 4 different continents. Looks like his main interests are in avian ecology and in large herbivores. Of course, my favorite topic. So he has published in Science, in conservation biology, biological conservation, and a bunch of other widely circulated publications, and is co-author of the book Conservation: Linking Ecology, Economics, and Culture. And so with that introduction, thank you, Pete, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. As you can tell from my bio that Alan read, I'm not a dog trainer and I'm not a veterinarian. I'm a conservationist. And so a lot of times, you know, my anxiety dreams of standing up to give a lecture with no pants on or something, they're replaced by people who are actually dog experts in this world. So forgive me if I trespass on anything veterinary, but I'm also, I'm interested. I love the nexus with policy. So I will invite feedback as well as if you have feedback or ideas and things like that, you know, fire away with those, just like the questions. As you can tell, I'm a conservationist and I came into this work from the conservation side. And that's really the angle that I've continued to sort of pursue. And so, you know, I chase the money and direct traffic and come up with crazy ideas for new projects. So I'm always interested in hearing all that stuff. And I kind of packed a lot in. So I'm just going to dive in and go real quickly. And off we go. This is our organization in one slide. We've been around for a couple of decades now, and I hope I'll give you an idea of the evolution of our field and how it works. You know, we've worked in a lot of different places and we've grown a lot. We've got about 6 or 8 candidate dogs in right now. We're about to cross over 50 dogs worldwide in the next little while. And we work in a variety of ways, from sort of one-off consultations to doing projects in collaboration with folks, to capacity building, to creating, you know, standalone programs. And in the bottom there are all the different contexts, the different programs. We call them the pillars that we run on, and I'll mention each of those throughout as we go. But we've sort of branched into a lot of different things nowadays. So hopefully I'll give you a sense of those. And then I sprinkled in a few things, my thoughts on policy. I'm not a policy guy, but some of the things that seem relevant and important to me. But like I said, I'm interested in feedback from all of you as well. So our field was really born out of you know, trying to find out about rare species. You know, these are 3 species. I personally know people who spent entire field seasons, sometimes multiple field seasons, even sometimes careers in the field studying these animals without seeing them. And so it's really difficult to you know, if somebody comes to us and says, how do I protect this creature? If we don't know, you know, what they're eating, what eats them, the diseases they're getting, you know, or even where they live. So, you know, as biologists and conservationists, we often intensify our efforts, you know, and this is an example from my history. We net gunned these pronghorn. These are pronghorn antelope. This is in Pinedale, Wyoming. We were trying to figure out the migration in and out of Teton Park. we captured 72 pronghorn in 36 hours to deploy GPS and radio collars. It cost us over $200,000. And that was Shell was paying for it and as mitigation funds. So we had the luxury of doing it that way. But my point here is that these capture operations, number one, they're expensive. Number two, they can be dangerous for wildlife. We were very careful. That helicopter team was fantastic. They're great, very careful. So we didn't injure or lose an animal, but that's not always the case. You know, pronghorn operations in particular can be very hard on pronghorn. They can lose as many as 20% of the animals that they handle. So it can be dangerous for wildlife, and it can be dangerous for people. This is actually the same helicopter that we were in. They were on a wolf operation 3 weeks later in Idaho, and they lost the tail rotor. And Rick Swisher was the pilot, and he was an absolute hero. He put the helicopter down on his side, and everybody lived, thankfully. But as you can see, they didn't walk away. So, you know, back in the 90s, we needed something that was safer for wildlife, safer for people, and not so expensive. And we landed on a dog's nose. A dog's nose, you guys know this, is the best chemical sensor the world has ever known. You know, every couple of years, we lower the threshold that you know, somebody publishes a new study. You know, we're down to single digits of parts per billion now that dogs are able to detect. But what's really special about a dog's nose is that it's attached to a dog. It's attached to this creature that's been living with us for tens of thousands of years and is very interested in working with us. And you know, we can take them anywhere. They'll work for food or a ball, and we can change them up. We can you know, learn new odors in an afternoon. So, you know, it is, everybody likes the sensitivity of it, but the truth is it's the flexibility of a dog and the speed that makes them so really exceptional. So our early work was, like I said, with a lot of endangered species. This is a grizzly bear. The first conservation detection dog project in North America was with grizzly bears in a place called the Okanagan in British Columbia. And really where it was born was, our field was really born when fecal DNA became, when it became possible to recover DNA from feces, from scats. And that, you know, at that point, we could tell what species it is. And now we can tell all sorts of other things, hormones, stress hormones, reproductive hormones, all sorts of stuff like that from scat. So we continue to do a lot of ecological monitoring. I'll tell you a little more about some of it. But first, I thought I'd just give you a little picture in your mind about what it looks like. If any of you have ever seen a bird dog hunting for birds, it looks a lot like that. Most of our dogs, when we're out doing the ecological work, their handler will walk on a transect line, but the dog is actually quartering back and forth, searching the whole time and looking for the target. And in fact, they're not just searching on that line. This is a little silly cartoon version of it, but as the human is walking on the transect line, we've got the advantage of olfaction, and it's bringing wind. It's bringing odor to us. So in fact, dogs are, while they're on that transect, they're actually sampling air that can come from as far as a half a kilometer upwind from them. And we've had dogs run up to 600 meters to alert to a find. So you know, they're actually sampling a much larger area than we might realize. And as you guys know, it's a special kind of dog that does this work. And we're a little bit different than a lot of organizations. We rescue the dogs that we train. But in order to do that, we have to screen a lot of dogs. We've gotten quite good at it over the years. I'll tell you a little bit about how we've gotten good at it. But even today, we screen about 1,000 dogs for every one that we take. And in the early days, it was relatively easy. When I started as executive director, we had 6 active dogs. But now, you know, as we're scaling up and helping other people and training other dogs, we have to cast a much wider net. In 2014, we started something called Rescues to the Rescue, and it's still up. And basically what we did after we tapped out all of the shelters here in Montana and Idaho and Wyoming, we started having to look wider. And so as you guys know, dog trainers can be very proprietary about their information and things like that. We decided to go completely the opposite way and just open source everything, including our dog screening criteria. So if you go to Rescues to the Rescue, you can watch the video and see how we screen for dogs. But much more importantly, you can also walk into your local shelter and tell us about a dog. And the great thing about that is you can upload the data, you can screen them systematically, upload the data, tell us about it. The great thing about that is, A, we find great dogs, not just us, it's other conservation dog organizations as well. But these are also, as you guys likely know, a lot of these are dogs that don't make good family pets. They're high drive, they're high energy. A lot of them have had multiple homes beforehand. So one nice thing about this is that the shelters really like it because these are the ones that when a family comes in with small children or someone elderly who can't get the dog out for exercise or whatever, they say, no, this is not an appropriate dog for you. So that's been a big help for us over the years. It's an interesting thing. It doesn't always work the way we planned it, but it brings in a lot of it gets us a lot of people, brings awareness and things like that. So it's great. There is a policy piece to this too, which is that, as you guys probably know, a lot of our agencies, federal agencies and the military, they're importing tons of dogs, bred dogs from Europe. And a lot of them, after the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, there's been a global shortage in detection dogs. And what we've seen is a lot of bad dogs are being bred. A lot of dogs that shouldn't be bred are being bred. Every Mal and Shepherd that some breeders can get their hands on, they're breeding. And we're seeing a resurgence of bad stuff like hip dysplasia and elbow dysplasia and things like that. So the policy angle to this is we would love, and when we launched this, we did it with IFAW, the International Fund for Animal Welfare. And our hope was that we could convince the agencies, not necessarily to always adopt shelter dogs, but at least to have a look, at least to tick the box and say, we're willing to look for rescue dogs. And so this is an ongoing process. I would love to see it expand and deepen and continue. But I'll leave it at that in the interest of keeping moving. But I wanted to acknowledge that Allison Martin, who is one of your predecessors, she came through the program. I should have looked up what year that was. It's been a number of years ago. Allison really helped us launch Rescues to the Rescue and to this day continues to be involved in it. So she's been a huge help and we're eternally grateful for that. Okay. So back to a little bit of data. Over the years, we've sent dogs all over a bunch of places. They've done a bunch of things. This is kind of the greatest hits. Dogs are really good at this this detection and ecological work. At the top you can see kit fox scat. That's our work. Working with kit fox, we've worked with them they're an endangered species for 22 years now. They can be very, very accurate when well trained and well handled. And all the way down to finding turtles. They're about 40 times faster than humans at finding turtles because turtles like to hide and they're pretty stinky. So they're easy to find for dogs. So a big chunk of our work has been that ecological work that I mentioned. And it's not just, when you say monitoring, it's not just research, but it's understanding where they are. We call that setting spatial priorities. It's knowing whether populations are going up and down, figuring out what's happening to them, and in fact, and intervening and making sure that the threats that are affecting these species are mitigated and where the threats are and all sorts of things. So it's really proliferated. And I'll just, as you guys can probably imagine, doing this kind of work is great talking for cocktail parties and things like that. And a lot of people love to hear the stories about the dogs and things like that. And I used to always say, it's a lot of fun. And it is a lot of fun, it's great. But it's also, the dogs do really hard stuff. They do stuff that humans just can't do. And so here's one example. The black-footed ferret is North America's rarest mammal. It's being reintroduced in a lot of places. They were presumed extinct, but they're very, very difficult to count. And so we're pouring millions of dollars into these reintroduction efforts. And as you guys probably know, there's a big veterinary angle with plague and prairie dogs and fleas affecting ferrets, primarily, die-offs of prairie dogs and then ferrets starve. But it's very difficult to know if those interventions to mitigate plague are working. And the only way we can do it is by counting ferrets and knowing where they are and where they're not. So the upshot of it is, camera traps, trail cams, are difficult to use. Ferrets spend most of their time underground. And so we use the dogs, and they do it between 8 and 16 times faster, and they do it at half the cost. So we've got a lot of people who are interested in using dogs to monitor ferrets. And one of the ones I'm most proud of is that picture on the bottom there. That's Frost, and he's with a woman who was our first tribal intern. She's from the Fort Peck Reservation here in Montana. Her name is Sakura Main, and a thriving ferret population is on the Fort Peck Reservation. And so, we're really happy that we got to help out there. One of the other things you do in conservation is you use a lot of superlatives. So from the rarest mammal in North America to what may be the rarest mammal in the world, that creature on the bottom is called a saola. It was last observed in the wild in 2013, but less than 2% of its habitat has been surveyed. And so we are part of a 2-year effort to find if there are in the Annamite Mountains. The Annamite Mountains separate Vietnam and Laos, and we will be with the Saola Foundation, Wildlife Conservation Society, a bunch of other partners to survey their habitat and find if they are still there, and if so, help protect it. And the last thing I want to say about the ecological monitoring is that we're always tracking new laboratory techniques that complement dogs. That's Amy Hurt, one of our founders. That was on a project with Cross River gorillas. Another superlative, it is the rarest great ape in the world. There are only about 250 of them in the world. But we were able to look for human diseases, gorilla diseases, and zoonotics like Ebola in that population, all from scat, totally non-invasively. They never saw a gorilla, didn't have to capture, handle one, anything like that. And now we can get contaminants, pharmaceuticals, heavy metals, flame retardants, endocrine disruptors, all from scats, and look at diet, hormones, parasites, all sorts of stuff. So, the value of scat and what we can find for it, it just keeps going up and up. And the cost of those and the cost of the laboratory techniques goes down and down. So it's just a great nexus. It's a great place to be for us. The next big thing that we use dogs for is biosecurity and invasive species. This all grew out of invasive species from recognizing that we could train dogs, on plants. And as you know, here in the West and in a lot of places, we have lots of problems with invasive plants. This one is Dyer's Woad. It comes from, that picture's in northern Utah, but Dyer's Woad was found here in Montana. We don't have big stands of it like that. And it's kind of a long story. There's some data to it, but what was really cool about it was when it arrived in Missoula, the community came out and really tried to get rid of it, pulling weeds and getting ahead of it, but they just couldn't. And so they asked us to help bring in the dogs. The dogs found over 500 weeds that human searchers couldn't find. That was over a decade ago. We're still doing the work. But this is the kind of weeds that the dogs are finding now. It's often, this is a Dyer's Woad plant. They're often finding them before they emerge, and most importantly, before they flower. And that's because they're searching with their noses and we search with our eyes. So they're able to find a lot of stuff that we just can't find. So that's really a game changer. It's just, we're getting close to eradication. I'll be thrilled when we go 3 years without a find. We're finding between 4 and 15 plants a year. We're just mining the seed bank as those come out now. So that's it's a cool project and a cool new dimension that the dogs have added. this is kind of another cutting edge one that I'm really excited about. We are right in the middle of this right now. This is work that we're doing with the Wild Sheep Foundation, Montana State, Idaho State, and as many of you may know, one of the major threats to bighorn sheep here in the West and North America is pneumonia that gets transmitted from domestic sheep. And you know, randy males who come and want to consort with domestic sheep are often the vehicle. They take it back to the herd. And we are in the midst of 2 whole herd die-offs here in Montana right now because of this. So there's an interesting COVID angle here. We started using sheep also as a model for respiratory disease. We asked the question during the pandemic, would it be possible to detect a respiratory disease from breath samples? And so we did put masks on sheep right when masks were becoming very political and people were calling you know, people sheeple and things like that. And we demonstrated that we can actually detect Mycoplasma ovidipmoniae is the nasty bug, and we can detect it from sheep breath samples. We've also demonstrated that we can detect it in scat. So that's a kind of a cool dimension, because again, we don't need to put masks on wild sheep, but we can just walk around out in the landscape and find their scats. And I'll show you how we do this. This is the scent wheel. We do it. That's our facility in Missoula. We do it in the lab, and we can present up to 12 samples to a dog at once. We also do it double blind. So I'm going to show you. This is Finn. I'm going to show you. Let her work for a second here and show you how it goes. And the reason we do it double blind is so that we don't cue them. You know, a lot of the proof of concept. You know, people question, is this real? Are they able to do it? And often we don't know the answer, so we don't want to cue them. So we've got this little isolated room, and what you can see there is there's a camera. We observe them remotely. Someone can sit outside the room and record the data, and also let us know whether the dog is right. There's the scent wheel, and in the video you're about to see, the target odor is in, it's a positive sheep sample. It's in can number 2. And then in the other cans are what we call distractor odors. You know, they could be anything: cat food, it's a blank filter, a rubber glove, hair gel. We use negative during training. We use negative sheep scat. So it's not just finding where there's a sheep scat. It could be whatever. But the idea is so that the dog doesn't just alert where there is any odor, they alert to the correct odor. Okay, and here goes Finn. You'll see Finn's alert is what we call a passive alert, or a trained final response. It's just to hold her nose on the sample. And here she goes. So she gets closed in by herself. You hear the command find, and there she goes. And there's her alert. And Lauren went, her handler said 2, and then the observer, Lauren didn't know the answer. And then the observer said correct, and then that's a treat and train. You know, it gives a food reward. And the reason we use a food reward is on that one is because the toy reward, it takes a while, and the dogs get kind of over aroused if you do a toy reward every time. So how are we going to use this? Well, one of them is bighorn sheep are gone from a lot of the places where they used to occur. And state agencies all over the West are moving sheep around all the time, but they don't want to move diseased animals. So at present, what happens is they'll capture sheep, they will isolate them for multiple days, they ground the helicopter, and they send samples to Waddle, the wildlife disease lab in Washington, and they wait for the answers. So that's really stressful for the sheep to keep holding them for that long. It costs a lot of money because you need all these trailers to isolate them, and it slows down these operations. So we are working with them to develop a system for screening in real time to tell them whether to move animals or not. This is Benny. He's also working on the project, and this is the kind of setup that we may use, something similar to this for the field when we're out on a capture operation with sheep. These are just snorkels. We call them snorkels. They're just PVC pipe. This is a way to present the disease samples to the dog in a lineup. Benny's alert is just the same as Finn's. It's just to hold his nose onto the target, and that's Paige Smith. She's handling him there, and he'll screen all of these, and you can tell me when he's on it there. He was about to move on, and then he saw the right one, and he came back, and he gets his toy reward there. So you can see why it's a little bit disruptive to do a toy reward every time. But that's his paycheck. Virtually all of our dogs are toy or tug rewarded dogs. So the other interesting part of this study, though, is we're trying to develop a method so that we can go screen a landscape. And those are domestic sheep. That's in Idaho. It's close to where I live. And what we want to be able to do is screen an area, whether it's domestic sheep or bighorn sheep, and know whether there are positive animals there. That involves some aging experiments. We have to take positive scats from known positive animals that have had, proper serology and testing. And then we leave the scats out in the sun and the wind and the rain and all that, and see how long that odor signature lasts. So we are in the midst of this. We're doing it right now. And hopefully in a year or two, I can come back and tell you that we're doing it. There's huge interest in this from the States, which is really wonderful to see. And hopefully we'll add a new tool to help protect bighorn sheep and keep them separate from domestic sheep. I should also mention, it's a side part of this, but we're also working on training livestock guardian dogs to not only keep predators out of sheep, but also wild sheep out of domestic sheep flocks. So that's kind of a cool angle as well. Okay, one more on biosecurity. This is South Georgia. It's a spectacular part of the world in the South Atlantic. And it has some of the most prolific, amazing seabird colonies in the world. But for a long time, it had rodents. And rats and mice are really hammer seabirds because they nest on the ground. They had no natural predators. So the rats can come right up and eat chicks. They eat eggs, and they're terrible. So the government of South Georgia and South Sandwich Islands spent over $13 million getting rid of rats and mice. And when they did that, they asked us to make sure that they never get back, never get back there. And so this is secret weapon number one. It's Sammy. He's not your typical working dog. He is a Shiba Inu dog, and he is trained to search ships. And this is him. This is at double speed because it's the last 2 minutes of a 6-minute search where he and his handler Naomi Cordiero was double blind. They didn't know where the rodent was. This is the last 2 minutes when he zeroed in on this room of the ship. And what I'll tell you is there were 6 individuals who also searched that ship for an hour before Sammy came in. And there he is. He's zeroing in on where the rat was hidden. His job now is to search every boat that goes to South Georgia. Those are tourism vessels, research vessels, and fishing vessels. So there's the rat. It was hidden in the pipe. And so Sammy did it in 6 minutes and 3 people or 6 people, sorry, couldn't do it in an hour. So it was he's a bit of a game changer. And by the reason we use Sammy is because he's little. He can be lowered down into the hold of a ship, and he can get in all the nooks and crannies and do all that stuff. So that's a neat one. There are over 400 islands in the world now that have eradicated rodents, and so we're hoping to replicate that and make sure that rodents don't get reintroduced to all those places. Okay, another major component for us is wildlife crime. Everybody knows about ivory and rhino horn, but literally hundreds of species get trafficked all around the world, and in lots of different ways. And so we use dogs in a variety of ways, a lot like narcotics. searching for smuggled contraband, wildlife contraband. But one of the parts that I'm really most excited about is this. This is a new version of a remote camera, like a camera trap. You can see the quarter there for scale. It's very small and it can be hidden. But what's really cool about it is it has an ultra low power artificial intelligence chip in it, and it can interpret what is in the image. And not only that, the wire that goes up goes to a satellite transmitter, and it can transmit via sat phone network and tell us what's in that image. So when it sees a human, it will alert the canine team. And these are two of our partners from Zambia, Sydney Mjovu on the left and Christopher Mwamba on the right. And that is Jack and Jean, the two new labs who are trained to track. So this technology, by identifying people, and these are images from a real pilot study in South Africa. Those little boxes are what we call bounding boxes, and the computer puts them on there every time it detects a human in an image. And as you can see, it detects them coming and going and at oblique angles, partial humans in a vehicle. These things they're really good at this. And we can put the dog out. As you guys may know from search and rescue or from law enforcement, they will age their tracks a number of hours before putting a dog on it. This technology allows us to put a dog out within minutes of a person crossing into a protected area, for example. And as many of you may know, it's illegal to enter protected areas on foot in Africa. In the left image there, you can see that's actually three different cameras. So they're very hard to find and see. And the really cool part about this is that the cameras are more valuable with dogs, and the dogs are more valuable with the cameras. So it's a great nexus, and we're rolling it out all over the place. We're also working on containers, doing something called RASCO. That's remote air sampling for canine olfaction. Basically, that's a fancy way of saying we suck air out of the container, we pass it through a filter, and then we present those filters to the dog. And the dogs tell us if there's ivory in there. So you combine that with some intelligence, and you can sample a lot of containers. The intelligence tells us which containers to sample. And we have to do that. We're not a law enforcement agency. We're not a customs agency. So we work very closely and help start something called the Conservation Canine Officers Association. So when we learn something new, we push it out through this network of conservation officers all over the world. And then they can run with it and apply it in all sorts of different ways. Okay, last big pillar is environmental justice. This is new for us. We've done projects that could qualify as environmental justice in the past, but our first systematic one, we decided we wanted to add this as a component that we will always seek to do, and it's with the Blackfeet Nation. This is in collaboration with Penn Vet. Some of you may know is already working on chronic wasting disease. And so our dogs there will also work on chronic wasting disease, but also detecting heavy metals, endocrine disruptors, and COVID-19 in wildlife there. And why is it a big deal on the Blackfeet Nation? Is because traditional lifestyles, they collect more species of game than most non-native people, and they do it over a larger time of year, and they have less access to healthcare. So there are more sort of comorbidities and risk factors. This project has the potential to really improve food security and food sovereignty, as well as wildlife health. So we're really excited about it. Our collaborators are from a great organization called Indigenous Vision. That's the founder and executive director of Indigenous Vision on the right there. Her name is Suta Callinglast. Our primary lead on it is Michelle Vasquez. And in our first year in the field, it was received incredibly well. So, one of the community members said this is the best thing that we could be doing to improve mental health and lower the suicide rate on the reservation, because it gives people a way to go back to a traditional lifestyle and do it safely. So we're really excited and proud about that, and we're going to be doing this one for a while. Okay, it's not news to you guys, but dogs get a lot of press and attention. We often point that out to our partners, and we hold press days so that they can get their messages out. And they do. They get out in a lot of different ways through a lot of outlets, both national and local. But we also do local visits with schools and the communities where the issues, the conservation issues are happening. And dogs can be a great tool for that, to engage people and to start a conversation. So it's a component that we didn't really anticipate early on, but it's an important one. So just in wrapping up, these are my relatively uninformed ideas about policy areas, but they're the ones that we think about a lot. Everybody loves to talk, strategy, training, things like that with dogs. Really, what we see, particularly in other parts of the world, particularly in the developing world, is that health and husbandry is the most important thing to keep dogs working well. So a lot of our capacity building programs are really about husbandry, keeping them healthy, and in order to be working well. The other interesting things, is that for a lot of the federal government, we call them collar and follower studies. Well, the feds do it, but state agencies do it a lot too. It's just kind of the old displacement behavior, I guess. People love to capture animals and put collars on them. And and I will never say that that's a waste of time, a waste of money. It's one of the only ways to get good mortality data, but that's about all you get from it. A lot of spatial, data and not much else. And a lot of times we can do a lot better by using non-invasive work and sampling a lot more animals and using scat. So there are no standards for that. And I think some setting the expectation of using the most effective and least invasive methods would be a really positive thing to promote. And then the last thing is, certification. Everybody says, well, are there certifications for this? It's a very complicated process because certification for drugs is pretty straightforward. There's a handful of drugs. They're all relatively similar. Heroin is heroin wherever you encounter it. It may be mixed with things, but not. But wildlife, there are so many different species, so many different contexts, so many different ways that it's packaged, degraded, things like that. It's very difficult to get everybody on board, much less to do it across all these different contexts like I've just shown you. So that's another another important point. This is the point I made earlier. Everybody loves to see them, everybody likes to hear about them, but these dogs are doing difficult stuff. These dogs are doing things that humans just simply can't do. Immediate, accurate disease screening in the field. We're working on a thing called a biomeme that does DNA in the field. It's about 70% accurate. It takes a number of hours and it's very expensive to do. But that's and it has to be parameterized for every single one that it does. So, we're making slow progress, but the dogs can do a lot of this stuff sort of very easily. Okay, a couple other just points, and then I'll invite your questions and feedback. People often say, how can we help? You guys are going out into the policy world. Tell everybody all about it. A lot of people still don't know that this work is, that dogs do this kind of work. They also don't know that it's scientifically validated and credible and all of that stuff. I mentioned to you guys that impact that Allison's had and continues to have with our organization. That's been great. When we've got 50 dogs, we need a lot of help taking care of these dogs. And so we have a foster program in Missoula. You guys have some great conservation dogs in your part of the world. Those organizations can use help and, volunteers and fosters and all that sort of stuff too. And of course, encourage people. I know you guys are poor students, but encourage, other folks to donate, because that's what really allows us to do the work and put the dogs and the money where it's going to have the greatest impact. People often ask where our money comes from. We get about a third of our money from individuals, about a third from foundations and government contracts, and a third in fee-for-service work that we do for universities, agencies, other NGOs, things like that. And this is the last sort of slide. These are our budgets over the years, and we've grown enormously, and this field has grown enormously. These red markers were all the different big changes that we've gone through as we've grown the organization. And the point is that it's an evolving field, and as this work has become more widespread and more sought after, we've had to evolve quite a bit in order to keep up with it, and to get around different constraints. It used to be finding dogs. Now we can find dogs. Then it was finding partners to work with. How we work, that's what consulting and stable is. We started just consulting rather than doing all the projects ourselves and telling everybody to get out. And in 2019 was when we got our facility, so we can bring people to us and train rather than go into them. So that was a lot very quickly. I imagine you may have felt like you're drinking from the fire hose. Those are my coordinates, and our social media and all of that stuff. If you guys want to reach out or follow us or do any of those things, and I can take questions now. And Ginny, should I stop the share? Should I stop sharing my screen, or should I leave that up for a minute?
You can leave. We can leave that up during Q&A.
Okay. Okay.
And then we have one so far from Emily Hagan. She says, "This is great. Thank you for the work and the talk. For such active working dogs, how do they do traveling internationally with such long, strenuous flights?" And another question is, what are your protocols for the amount of time /travel for the dog? Yeah. All of the working dogs, they're all crate trained, and we often drive them across the country, so they're used to being in their crates. It's a secure, safe, cozy place for them to be, and that's so in that sense we're pre-adapted. But I often joke that sometimes invading some of these countries would be easier than bringing dogs in there, because there are veterinary requirements. The airlines have some requirements. It's often difficult to get them out during the summer. As you guys know, in the pandemic, you can hardly fly dogs anymore. So we really avoid flying them when we can, and that's partly what drove our capacity building programs. But we do still source dogs in this country, so we do have to do it sometimes. So it's every one of them is different, but we'll often we don't fly them. Say for example there's a Dulles to Johannesburg flight. We don't do that. It's just too many hours. So what we do is we'll go to Amsterdam first. KLM has a great pet handling facility. They take them out, they walk around, they'll feed them, they'll do all that. And then, you break it up into legs. We do not, we train for it in advance. We don't medicate because that could be risky in terms of, well, you guys are in a vet school, far better than I do about that stuff. But we get them ready and get them used to being in a loud environment and, planes moved around and all of that stuff beforehand. So, that's not it's a case-by-case thing. And we try to minimize how much we do it, but when we do it, we prepare for it well in advance. That sounds great. Next question, Kathleen Morgan. She says, "Thank you so much for your outstanding work. I was wondering if you can speak more about the kinds of internships that you have available and their expectations." And I just wanted to say, I see Allison Martin's online. I don't know if you want me to have her pop on too.
Yeah, Allison, fire away. You want to share your sort of experience? Yeah.
Hey, Allison. I just made you a panelist. I don't know if you're around, available. That was a surprise to her.
Okay. Well, yeah, it may have been. I'll share. Oh, there you are.
Oh, yep. Okay, sorry, I'm here. Yeah, so just speaking from my own personal experience, when I did my internship, which was 2016, I was there in 2017. So I was part of the 2016, 2017 class. At that time, there really wasn't a internship work going on for dog handling and the actual field work. So Pete can probably speak more to that. My personal interest specifically was with rescues to the rescue and learning more about that and helping out with that program. So that's, that was really my main point of focus for why I reached out to these guys.
Yeah, and Allison could probably give you a whole hour talk on just rescues to the rescue. The quick version of that is, I think we got the dog part of it right, in that we've gotten really good at screening dogs. I think the human dimension is difficult, and it's because shelter volunteers are time stressed, they're under-resourced, and they're incredibly dedicated to those dogs. And so it's not very satisfying for them to just upload data into the cloud and not know, what's going to happen to that dog and where they go. So we end up still doing a lot of face-to-face interaction and talking about it because people really care about what's going to happen to those dogs. So right now we only have one formal project that we seek to fill internships, and that's with the native interns. We've got 2 native interns this year, and we're adding 2 dog handler teams for tribal nations here in Montana. But all of our other internships, if and when they happen, they're initiated by the students. So they reach out and say, hey, here's my program, here's what I've done, and here's what I'm interested in. And then we have a conversation about whether and how it works. The native interns, we cover their costs, and with non-native interns from universities and other places, we provide the opportunities, but the costs are up to them. So that's kind of it. It's kind of a make me a deal kind of program, because I think it's always important for students to come in with their ideas and things that they're interested in, because we can hand you a project and the only thing I'll be sure of is it won't go the way we think it will, and then who knows if that's good or satisfying or fits the needs of your program or things like that. So if there are, like Allison reached out and said, hey, I'm here, I've got some ideas, and we developed and we were just getting going on rescues to the rescue at that point, and it worked out really well. So that'd be great to explore some of those things and see what we're doing, and if we've got part of the world or something like that. So should I just dive into the other questions? The turtle.
Sure, and thank you, Allison, for your comments too.
Oh yeah, and all your work, Allison.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. I'm happy to do it. I love doing it.
Yeah. Okay, Julie Lisk about turtles. Yeah, the upshot, turtles are one of the best bang for your buck that you get with dogs. So yeah, they can find them. And they're also really good at finding little ones, the small age classes that humans often miss. So that's great. And up in your part of the world, you've got eastern box turtles, a listed species. There's some good dog work happening finding eastern box turtles. Yeah. Eileen asking about what criteria to retire. Interestingly, a lot of our dogs will work up until their 12th or 13th birthdays. So it's really a slow retirement. Usually what happens is they stop doing the big physically demanding work, and they do a lot of stuff like the discrimination, the wheel work, things like that. Because those dogs, when they get old, there's some data that their olfaction reduces, but quite honestly, I think a lot of the questions we ask them and the tasks we give them are so high above the threshold that that doesn't really matter. But we give them less physically taxing things, because a lot of the older dogs, they're really good at problem solving. And so we like to keep them working as long as we can. And as we've gotten bigger and have more diversity of projects, we're more able to tailor them to what each dog is able to do. But when they do retire, we
take care of them forever. They almost always retire with their primary handler and hold down the couch for the rest of their days and just live as a pet. Okay, let's see. Oh, remote internships. Yeah. Violet's asking, are remote internships a possibility? Yeah, we're a distributed organization now. We live online. We were kind of pre-adapted for the pandemic because we've got people all over the place. And so we do a lot on Zoom and we keep everything on Drive and all that stuff. So yeah, there's quite a bit that could happen remotely.
That's great. Violet is a current MAP student. Like
Oh,
Allison.
good. Okay.
Yep.
Awesome. Let's see. It's better to get a dog from scratch. Oh, yes. Yeah. So our dogs, we do. Sorry. The question is, do we prefer dogs from scratch or repurposing dogs that have been done other things or flunked out? Yes, we do. We call them career change dogs. We've gotten some from Customs and Border Protection. We've gotten a few. We had a patrol dog named Jax who was supposed to be a Green Beret, but he didn't like to bite. So we do repurpose. It all depends on why they washed out. We do get a lot of FEMA dogs sometimes, or from Search Dog Foundation. We've got a great relationship with them. A lot of the dogs who don't like the rubble pile, who can't walk on the rubble, they'll often come to us, and we just find projects where they can fit in. So yeah, that's one of the ways. But we can start from scratch too when they've got that drive.
Wonderful. We should probably, and then Martha Grace Kathleen is an instructor in the MAP program, and Martha Grace is too. She teaches animal law, and she said, excellent program.
Thank you. Thanks for the feedback.
So we should probably wrap up. I wanted to leave up your contact information instead of putting up our upcoming events because there's so many good questions and interest. I can follow up with our upcoming events to anybody who registered as well. So that's no problem. Did you want to
feel free to give them out to whoever wants them.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Thanks to everyone for attending, and I'm sure there will be follow-up.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Great program.